This is just a real honor that Dr. Andrew Hill has been able to join us today. We've spent the last several years, I personally, Pam has cultivated these relationships with the Federal Reserve. Here we go. One more, Linda. Pam has cultivated these relationships with our national partners, which includes the Philadelphia Federal Reserve, for quite some time. Hello, you made it. Thank you so
Yes.
much. And so it's just a real honor that Dr. Hill will be available to be here with us today. We get to see each other at different conferences. He's worked with us, I think, 5 years in a row on professional development. And I'm going to say he keeps talking about how nice our Washington educators are. And so I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you because they want to hear from you far more than they would like to hear from me. So thank you for being here. I know it was a challenge for your schedule today, but thank you for making time for us.
Thank you so much for having me. You can hear me, right? Very good. So, sorry for the very strange sort of aspect ratio here to my appearance. I'm on my iPad, sort of behind a curtain in the AV area of the Hershey Lodge here in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I'm actually at the Pennsylvania Department of Education Standards Aligned System Conference, their SAS conference that they do every December. And I know you have similar kinds of conferences in Washington State as well. So it's lots of educators and administrators from across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and we've done a strand on personal finance here the last couple of days. So I just came from a session about our high school personal finance course that I know many of you in Washington State know because we've worked with your teachers on. So a few thoughts, and I apologize again for the fact that I'm sort of in an awkward position here presenting, but I wanted to make sure that I had a chance to talk with you all today. You know, I think there's so many things about personal finance that are moving in the right direction. You know, we're seeing nationwide, more and more states have mandates. I don't think that mandates are the begin and end all, but I think it's an indicator of the way that states, administrators, policymakers are realizing the importance of this work. And one of the things I said earlier today to a bunch of administrators is that I think we have to always focus on the fact that this is something we know is really important for kids. It's something that is an investment in our future in terms of making sure the kids leave their K-12 experience with a strong understanding of personal finance. You know, one of the stories I always tell, as Tracy and others of you that I've worked with in Washington know, I do a lot of cruises. I think I've done 55 cruises in the last decade, or well, since 2008, so more than a decade. And you know, you meet a lot of people on those types of trips, as well as other places. And you know, people ask you what you do, and I say, well, I train teachers to teach kids about money. And no one in that time, and I probably have said that to more than 1,000 people over the years, no one ever says, oh, I don't think that's important. They always say, I think this is incredibly important. I wish I'd had that more. I wish my kids had more of it. It's really an important thing. I think the challenge for policymakers is bridging the gap between the public's strong interest in having kids learn this material, and then how do we make that happen in a world with scarce resources, it's scarce classroom time in the K-12 classroom. And you know, states like Washington have made those choices and are doing the hard work to make it happen. So you know, we've had a lot of success over the years as a field in a number of areas. I think one of the challenges continues to be that there are more providers, more people who are interested in doing this work and helping out than we necessarily have classroom time to make it happen. And so it requires states, policymakers, Department of Ed, certainly school districts and schools and individual teachers to make choices about the types of curriculum materials they're going to use. I always encourage folks to look for those high quality materials that have proven outcomes in terms of engaging students. We know that student engagement is a really important topic, and I can talk a little bit in a few minutes about some research we recently did in that space. But high quality materials matters a lot, and getting really good evaluation of curriculum materials before you implement them in the classroom. Here in Pennsylvania yesterday, we were doing a lot of talking about the fact that there's probably not one lesson or one set of curriculum that's right for every teacher and every student. And so in Washington, FEPPP, and its partners have done a lot to try to bring lots of different types of curriculum options to teachers so that they have things that they can choose from. That's important. One size does not fit all. Not every teacher is equally adept or comfortable teaching every single type of lesson, and there's many different types of lessons that are out there, and what's effective with different groups of students will be different. So having some choice in that has been really, really important. Your state made a major commitment to having a set of very high quality standalone personal finance standards. We worked for over 20 years here in Pennsylvania. We had a unique situation. Well, I'm sure it has happened in other states, but it was a very trying situation for us here in Pennsylvania, which is that personal finance content was spread across 3 or 4 different content areas standards, and we didn't have a set of standalone standards. So my colleagues and I, we've worked for over 20 years to try to get a standalone set of standards. We were able to do that a couple of years ago. They have now been put into place, put into law. And that's been a very valuable thing. When we wrote our standards here in Pennsylvania, we looked to the Washington state standards as one of the models that we looked at. You all have made some choices about having specific grades in your standards. Others of us have chosen bands. Those are state-specific types of choices. The other thing that you all have done a great job with is thinking about how do you provide high quality professional development and how do you make investments in that. So one of the things that I always talk to other people in other states about is that Washington's really has been a shining star in terms of bringing resources to this problem. Many states will put in place certain requirements for school districts to implement, let's say, new standards or courses or other types of implementation of academic programs without any support for increased professional development or curriculum materials and those types of things. And your state's done a good job towards making those kinds of investments, as well as bringing together both private and public money in order to make that a success. So I think one of the things that in Washington you should be very proud of is the way in which you've been able to bring together various groups in order to together support K-12 personal finance. Starting early matters tremendously, and I think a lot of times people who maybe don't know the personal finance space or don't know about working with kids as much as others do, and this sometimes happens with people in industry, they think, well, this is something you'd wait until high school for. Really, we don't want to wait. We want to be bringing this content to students starting in elementary school and building over time. It makes it much easier by the time you get to high school if students already have a grounding in personal finance. And so that comes with the standards such as the ones that you've written, which start in the young grades and continue on through high school. But then, also making commitment to having good quality materials for teachers to use, as well as making the commitment to professional development across those grade levels. And I know I've been chatting with my colleagues out there about how we can bring some elementary personal finance training. I sometimes like working with the elementary school teachers even more than the high school teachers. Don't tell the high school teachers I said that, but elementary school teachers are tremendous fun to work with. And one of the things as an economist that really I think is valuable about working with elementary school teachers is it forces you to really get back to the basics, because you're talking about the basics of the concepts, and it makes me a better economist and better personal finance educator when I have to work on the basic content as much as I do the more advanced content as well. So starting early definitely matters. Some states and some places, they're not making those kinds of commitments, but Washington, you've made those kind of commitments over time. You've worked with one of the best practices, which is to use children's literature and bringing children's literature stories that have personal finance content in them and bringing those to teachers so that teachers can then use those with their students. The last few days here, we've been talking a lot about how we can bring real world stories, encourage teachers to bring their real world stories into the classroom, and that those are the types of things that engage their students, that get their students thinking about personal finance and how it's going to relate to their lives directly. And so I think, continuing to encourage teachers to tell the kinds of stories from their own lives, be open about maybe their own personal finances, or have outside speakers come in and share their outside experiences, their real world experiences with personal finances, successes and mistakes, is very valuable as well. Over the last 23 years that I've been in this field, I've been a person who's really encouraged us to talk to kids about the full gamut of personal finance topics, not simply decide that there's some things we're going to talk to kids about and some things we don't because we make assumptions about what they might be interested in. I'm increasingly thinking that it's important for us to have conversations with students about what's going to be there for them in terms of what they need to do to save for retirement. Waiting on that just because we think they're not interested in that is probably not the best thing. We need to share that with them. I think we also need to be realistic about personal financial education. Like all kinds of education, we're teaching kids and preparing them on a wide range of topics. Some of those topics they're not going to remember every detail about, but they're going to have the kernel of the fact that they learned something about that. And then we help them to understand about how they go back, whether it be on the internet or otherwise, to get the additional information when they actually need to use that. My example always is that I don't remember a whole lot of detail about learning about trigonometry. And I have never used trigonometry in my adult life, but the other day, I was actually watching a show about ancient civilizations and how one of the things was about how they calculate the size of the Earth. Well, guess what? They used trigonometry for that. And while I didn't understand every minute little bit about how to do that problem, I remembered the concept of what was going on there. And I think it's the same thing with personal finance. We're trying to instill in them an ethos around personal financial education and personal finance capability. And then they're going to build on that as they go out into adulthood. They're not going to use every bit of knowledge. They're not going to remember every bit, but they are going to have that foundation. And that's really the fundamentals of what we do in terms of thinking about how we teach students in lots of different curriculum areas. We know that young people are interested in things involving money, about their futures, about the real world. They are interested in that. So as teachers are comfortable and able to open up and share about their personal financial lives, that I think is valuable. Or again, as I said, bringing in outside speakers. Done a lot of research over the years in this space. Ours has been pretty confined to our Keys to Financial Success course. So I'll tell you a little bit about Keys. We've trained teachers in Washington. We were very, very grateful that Tracy and our friend Pam Whaley and Washington State from an early on identified they had a strong interest in learning more about our Keys to Financial Success program. The pandemic helped us because we built a complete online training, which we were then able to share with teachers in Washington, and along with our teachers from our district, that's Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. And a group of folks came to the Philadelphia Fed when we did our in-person training. And then I came out to Washington State and helped you all run a training out there. And then you've gone on to do some training as well. We're constantly in the state, or I shouldn't say constantly, but we're in periodic periods of revising our Keys to Financial Success course. So this is an entire plan for teaching a high school personal finance course, 47 lessons. But we've done a lot to measure the effectiveness of that program over time. So we pre and post tested students. Students gained significantly in their personal finance knowledge, about 25 percentage points, so that's about a 60% gain actually in their personal finance knowledge from pre to post test if you give them a semester high school personal finance course, and that course has good high quality lessons and the teachers are trained. So that was we actually have, I think, still the largest gain that's documented in the personal finance literature. And it makes sense. We're having students be on task for a full semester of personal finance. And we have highly trained teachers that we've worked with and that get ongoing support. So training matters. The other thing that's really interesting is our students don't come to these courses with no knowledge of personal finance. So I think sometimes we're a little hard on teenagers. We think that they don't know anything. I think sometimes they pretend that they don't know anything. But when we test them at pre-test, we find that they do know some things. So some of the basics, they know that savings is an important thing. It's a good thing. It's a thing that they should be doing. It's more about, by the time you get to high school, how do you do that? They don't know coming into a high school course, they don't know a lot about credit scores and credit reports. They don't know much about insurance. And it makes sense. These are not things that they necessarily would be exposed to yet. And so it's important for us to think about and model how we get them to understand more about those types of, as I call them, more advanced personal finance topics by the time they get to high school. One of the things we've also found through our research is that active and collaborative learning really matters. That it's not just doing what I'm doing right now, which is talking at people, but rather we want to get the kids engaged, whether it be in simulations or role playing. They do group work where they think about personal finance problems and work together. That's all been very valuable and powerful over time. Teachers matter tremendously, and one of the things I've talked about the last couple of days here with teachers and administrators in Pennsylvania is thinking about how do we choose and bring teachers into the personal finance teaching who are really committed to this and really passionate about it. We don't want to be volunteering teachers to teach personal finance. We don't want to be necessarily choosing the new teacher because that happens to be the open course. We want to be trying to build a cadre of teachers in our districts, in our states that are very passionate about this topic because they're going to make a significant impact on students' lives. Recently, I was listening to another researcher, and he was talking about a survey that was done of teachers, and those teachers were reporting that they asked the teachers what would be the factors, and they had to choose from a list. What are some of the factors that would cause you to leave the teaching profession? The number one for one group of teachers, and then for the entire sample, it was their number two reason for potentially leaving the profession was because they don't have autonomy in the classroom. So we do a lot to try to build autonomy, giving them, again, as I said, many different options that they can choose from. So just a few more things I'll say about Washington. I already talked a little bit about your standards, and you've done a great job of committing to that. I talked about your significant monetary commitment that you've made over time to providing resources into this space to make sure that teachers are well positioned to be able to move forward with personal financial education. And you've sought those high quality partners. And then ultimately, I'll emphasize the fact that you have a lot of people in your state who really care very deeply. I know all of you who are on this call today about this topic. And so having members of the public, policymakers who are very committed to this topic is incredibly important in terms of moving it forward and making sure that we get this into the classrooms for the students. So I've done quite a bit of talking, and I will turn it over back for some questions. I know Tracy had said that you likely would have some questions for me, so I'm very willing to answer whatever I can today.
Yeah, I'll start. Thank you, Dr. Hill, for your perspective. I'm Representative Monica Stonier. I'm the chair of FEPPP, and I
Nice to
represent
meet
the
you.
legislative district. Nice to meet you. Represent the legislative district very south, the southest, as far south as you can go in Washington State, just across the river from Portland. And I'm one of the very nice teachers in Washington State. I was doing that work before I came to work as as a legislator and continue as an instructional coach for inclusive practices in my region. We have other very nice Washington teachers here, and I've heard you also have very nice teachers in Pennsylvania. So, how lucky are you to be able to work with all of those folks?
Yes,
My
absolutely.
question for you is my question for you is, really, I think validating for us to hear the things that we're doing right in Washington State and the long, kind of slow, gradual work we've done to build up a mission and and kind of a structure for delivering on that mission in our state. I'm curious from what you've seen around other states and in your work, if you have kind of concerns and worries and things we should be keeping our eye on as we move forward in our implementation. So any warning signs, red flags, stay away from uh, um, this disaster. It's something that we can be thinking about kind of in the long run as we continue our efforts here. What are the things that keep you up at night when you're worried about our work?
So one thing I should mention is I should all have said the normal standard disclaimer for Federal Reserve folks, which is that the remarks I'm giving are my own and not necessarily those of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia and
Yeah,
those of the Federal Reserve System.
fair enough.
But in some ways, I have some of the same fears that I've had for the last 20 some years. And um, I think that this is a collaborative process in terms of bringing personal finance to students. I worry about state mandates. I've always, when I was younger, I really thought that the panacea to this was a high school personal finance mandate. The challenge with that is I really now realize I want districts to be doing this because they want to do it. I want teachers and schools to be wanting to do this. And I worry sometimes when we mandate things that we get away from that. And so I think, how can we incentivize schools, school districts, teachers to do a good job in this space rather than trying to use the stick to push them to do it? And the last few days here in Pennsylvania, we've been meeting with teachers and administrators who are required now to offer a high school personal finance course because that passed in Pennsylvania a couple of years ago and it will go into effect. I also worry a lot about teachers being confused by the tremendous number of curriculum resources that are out there, some of which are going to be effective and some of which aren't. That has always concerned me. There's a lot of resources, and it's sometimes very difficult for the strongest ones, the ones that are most effective, to rise to this top, especially if the teacher doesn't have help in that. I think it's valuable that so many people want to work in this space, but I am concerned about sometimes the motives of some of the players in the space. Um, I don't feel like any district or teacher should really have to pay for curriculum materials in this space, unlike some other disciplines where the highest quality materials are available from firms that are for profit. In this space, many of the highest quality things are available free of charge to teachers. I should say all of them. And so there's a lot of people that are willing to help. Um, Another thing that has been a concern for me over time is that we sometimes get caught up, as particularly those of us who maybe come from industry and don't work with students all the time, we get caught up in fad's not the right word, but the most recent topic or the most current topic, and we think that that's something that we have to teach kids about. Think about the number of financial products that have gone away over time. Think about the fact that 10 years ago we didn't know anything about cryptocurrency at all. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be teaching kids that, but I think we need to be careful that we don't completely teach students about today only. And so I've always thought that a real valuable thing is to teach kids and ground them in how we think about making decisions, about how we think about our personal financial lives in a holistic way, rather than trying to focus on any particular financial product or whatever the latest thing is. So that's something, those are some of the things. And probably after I get off of this, Representative Stoner, I probably think we'll think of, I'll be in the car driving back to Philadelphia, which is about 22 hours from where I am, and I'll probably think of 10 other things that I should have said. But those are a little snippet of what comes to mind.
Well, I'm sure others will have questions, so feel free to raise your hand if you do. But I do appreciate your perspective. I also raised concerns about mandate in Washington State, but we did a lot of steps to get to this place. We passed a bill that required school board directors and school boards to discuss and learn, because many of them weren't sure what their financial ed offerings were in their districts. So they were directed to have a meeting to learn about what their financial ed plan is and to set a goal. And we were not very directive at all about what that goal should be.
Mhm.
Our wish was that every school district in the state had their leaders talking about financial literacy, because there's so much kind of inherent organic interest and desire that
Yeah,
if that conversation started, we would see an uptake in interest at FEPP. And so we've tried
yeah,
to kind of incentivize a number of ways, and even the bills that have been introduced that do have a mandate in them have them pushed out quite a ways so that we
yeah,
can grab on to those educators in Washington State who do carry this passion as early adopters and provide them opportunities to become leaders in this space as we get to a place, should the legislature decide at some point that it should be required. We have an interest in making sure we implement it in a way that the early adopters are the leaders. And then by the time folks who maybe don't have the same experience or passion, they have lots of resources around them when it gets
yes,
to that point in time. So I hear that warning, and I think we've kind of used that to guide our process
yeah,
here, but appreciate the insight you've had for us on other
sounds good.
things. Certainly quality of materials is something we're looking at, and we're really grateful that FEPP has a team that can vet those and provide
Yes,
recommendations for folks. So
yes,
we're lucky to have the team here, and I think it's good. We're worthy of good investment from the state to kind of be the filtering process for those resources for our educators, so that it's not left to those teachers to try and kind of sort that out on their own, especially if they
yes,
don't feel that they have the expertise to do so.
yes.
Okay, are there other questions from members of the committee? Yeah, Bobby.
Oh, Dr. Hill, so good to see you. Um, so,
Good to
uh,
see you.
yes, sir. Just a quick question for you. So, I've been looking at financial learning, teacher confidence, and student readiness. Question for you. I absolutely agree with you on the idea of having that, building that teacher capacity, doing it holistically over K-12. as we look at implementation of a graduation requirement with all the other political pieces that are involved, are there examples of state policy or other places, provincial, where they've been able to tie the K-12 readiness to the graduation requirement? Have you seen any examples
Well,
to do
one
that?
of the ways you do that is certainly through the standards being there and asking that the standards be implemented. I think the challenge sometimes is that elementary and middle school teachers might think because there's a high school mandate that means then that the pressure's off at the elementary and middle school levels. And I think communication around that's important. New Jersey has now put in place also a middle school requirement, so they have both a high school and a middle school requirement, and that has some implications as well. Then in terms of making sure that happens. Now, I don't know whether that is sort of a mission creep, if you will, from the high school mandate that they realize that now because we put this high school mandate in place, we have to do the same for middle school. One of the things that has happened here in Pennsylvania is that they've said that the types of teachers, the certifications of the teachers who can teach this is wide ranging. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we had those three disciplines that all had some personal finance in their standards until relatively recently. And so we had teachers who were social studies teachers, business ed teachers, family and consumer science teachers. All these teachers were capable of business ed as well. Those certifications are all possible for teaching the requirement. And that's, I think, been helpful in terms of making it easier for school districts. By the way, we have roughly 500 independent school districts in the state of Pennsylvania and about the same in the state of New Jersey. These are very heavy local control states where individual school entities they are responsible for figuring out how they're going to implement these things. And so having that diversity is important. I think the one thing that would be valuable is being able to measure what's working, which ones are doing better than others. But then, of course, that creates some fears in terms of what does that mean if the state's trying to measure that. But it would be valuable to see whether some of these different models that are going to come from the ways in which these are implemented. Professional development is incredibly important. We know that teachers do not necessarily have great confidence in this space, and so providing them with high quality professional development and not just having that at implementation of a new set of standards or implementation of a requirement, but making that an ongoing thing. We know particularly in the elementary school grades, there's tremendous turnover. The cadre of elementary school teachers in the United States today is incredibly young, incredibly inexperienced sounds like a bad word here, but they have very short tenures. They have not been in their positions for very long on average. And so continuing to be able to provide professional development at the younger grades is incredibly important. And I think also making it relatively easy for them to be able to implement that. And that means having high quality lessons that provide them with all the support right there built into the lesson.
Thank you, Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Bobby.
Any other questions from members of our general committee? Well, my deepest gratitude, we have not had a chance to meet in person, but one day when I'm traveling around, I'll look you up when I'm over in your neck of the woods.
Sounds good.
Tracy,
Please do.
I will. Tracy, I'll leave it to you to close us out and move us on to our next presenter.
And
Okay.
Jesse, I saw there you had a question. Tracy
Oh.
can share my email with you.
Okay.
Saw
Yeah,
that
I'll make
pop up.
sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thanks
being
so much.
here. Yeah.
And again, I
we'll,
apologize for the strange setup here. I normally like to be at my desk and all that good stuff, but
no, we're honored to have you here, and we will be in touch for our next training that we're going to schedule.
yes, sounds good. Looking forward to it. Take care,
Thank you.
everyone. Happy
Thank you.
holidays.
You as well. Bye-bye.